Hello, 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 you guys. Oh, we are back and we are featuring another creative Black woman. This is a series where we celebrate visionaries using their voices, talents, and platforms to shape the world. Today, we are honored to sit down with Maya Golden Bethany, award-winning journalist, author, and advocate who bridges truth-telling, healing, and justice. Maya has written for Newsweek, Salon, Insider, and blackgirlnerds.com. And her memoir, The Return Trip, is a powerful reflection of survival, identity, and resilience. Her upcoming novel, The Senator, which I'm looking forward to, is a political thriller with a Black female protagonist, proving that Black women belong in every genre and in every space. If you've ever wanted to know what it was like to turn lived experiences into storytelling, navigating the publishing world, and using your voice to drive change, this episode is just for you. So without further ado, let's welcome Maya on the stage. Hello, Maya.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You for just agreeing to do this, to be a part of this. I am, first of all, let me just say, I'm looking forward to your latest book because in reading the description, even before our interview, I was like, oh, I got to get that. I love politics, and anything with Black women in politics is right up my alley. So I love that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm hoping that more people are interested. Political thrillers. This is a tough time. It would seem. I know a lot of people maybe don't want to discuss politics, but
we're living in a political thriller right now, aren't we?
You know what? I don't think there's any fiction that could be created that could keep up with the news cycle currently. But
every time the news comes on, we like this. You say what happened next?
Exactly. Yeah, it's stranger than fiction, really. I don't think in our wildest creative minds that we could come up with some of this, but I'm hoping for people that just love a good escapism, a good person to root for, a good protagonist. I wrote a memoir first, as you mentioned, and so writing about a protagonist was a little bit different because that character was me. And I wasn't always rooting for me. I'll be honest. So, there were some times where I look back at life and I'm like, girl, what were you doing? But with writing The Senator and writing Alex Broussard is the name of the journalist in the story. And she is
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
It's okay. She's a journalist with the New York Times. And I really enjoyed fleshing out Alex's character and giving her backstory and just being able to step into the world of fiction. It is very, very different from being a journalist and telling truth stories or even writing a memoir and telling your truth. So it was a good break, but I very unwisely told myself after I finished the first memoir, I said, I will never do that ever again. And my third book is actually another memoir. So it's not necessarily that I'm a glutton for punishment, but I just believe in the power of storytelling and that somebody somewhere will sometimes get their hands on your book and it will help them through a situation. And so I'm writing my next book about I'm the parent of a child with autism spectrum disorder. And I'm basically writing about being neurodiverse from trauma versus being that way by birth and how we navigate that together as a multicultural family. So I thought that was a very important story to tell when you start factoring in family beliefs, religious beliefs, being in the South, how you don't necessarily raise a child when they're on the spectrum the same way that we were raised. And it's a non-factor actually to try to even think that way. So, but again, going back to The Senator, I'm just very excited to have the opportunity to step into the fiction world. So I might jump in and jump back out from time to time, just to give myself a break from from all the truth telling, but
the reality of it all. Yes.
Yes.
Now, storytelling has been a huge part of your life since childhood, and you enjoy storytelling. How did your experience as a survivor sort of shape your approach to writing?
Really, I always thought that I was just really, just had a vibrant imagination. And I was lucky that I have parents, especially my mom, that cultivated creativity. We used to have real tea parties when I was 5, and one of my earliest memories was watching The Wizard of Oz and just being blown away by that story. But what I thought was just daydreaming actually is another thing that I try to raise awareness about. It was dissociative disorders.
Ah,
When I was going through the trauma of being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, dissociative disorder became my way of escaping. So it was the thing that protected me by not having to think about what was happening to me. So a lot of times in those dark moments, my mind would go someplace else and I would invoke that creativity. And so it's always been there. I didn't necessarily know what to call it. And I think it's odd sometimes that the thing that we think can be hurtful and harmful to us when it becomes, dissociative, actually is the thing that makes us creative. So it's the same way when I write. I can tune everything else out and sort of go into almost this meditative state where I'm just,
mm,
I can see the sights, hear the sounds of what the scene is, and try to just be so engulfed in it. And that actually goes back to my childhood. So it's a very odd sort of thing that creatively that's where I draw that inspiration from. But I had a counselor tell me once that trauma and creativity are stored in the same parts of the brain. And I think that's a little messed up, but at the same time, it is the thing that helps. And so that's why you see a lot of people who maybe have complex PTSD or are highly traumatized that are in the creative world.
I was just getting ready to say that if you really take a look at a lot of our really well-known, famous, even dead and alive creatives, and you think about their real lives and the trauma that they experienced in their real lives, what you said really makes sense.
Right.
And
It's
I agree with you. It's really messed up, but
is, and I think back to a Maya who is much greater and smarter and profound and prolific than I ever could hope to be. But Maya Angelou, her
yeah,
story is that she was a survivor of multiple abuses and how it impacted her with addiction. And but we know her name. You
yeah.
go the world over and everyone knows her name because of her
I
creativity.
was just going to say, we know her creativity, we know her passion, we know, all of that. So know her trauma as well from her storytelling as well. So yeah, because she didn't speak years, and then one day to just come out with these poems and to use words so eloquently, all stemming from a place of trauma.
Right. It's a very sad but beautiful story when you think of how profound. I think of I Rise, the poem, and just how much
Yeah.
it's been an inspiration and someone being able to tap into the deepest parts of themselves to put that on the page and on the paper. That's, to me, that's what the literary community is. That's what being a poet, a
Yes.
writer is we put our feelings out there to have other people relate. And I think the world needs that more now than ever is people understanding each other and empathy. And I don't just mean a join hands kumbaya. I just mean that
Yeah.
we really need to speak up and start telling our stories, especially in the Black community, where a lot of our stories as survivors, we keep it silent or we sweep it under the rug. It's sometimes silenced by religion in some cases. And so I think it's important that we have storytellers leading the way, especially right now.
Now, that brings me to a very important question. Many survivors sort of struggle with telling their stories publicly. What advice would you give to someone who wants to share their truth but fears the backlash of doing so?
I would say that you have to truly be in a place where you are okay with yourself, and also to give yourself grace, because you might start the process and might start putting, pen to paper or typing and going back to those memories. But one thing that was helpful for me, and I'm very blessed to have the counselors in my life that I've had and therapists that I've worked with, but not only that are I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization, the 1 in 3 Foundation, and we provide counseling services to survivors of sexual abuse and sexual trauma. One of the things that I don't think that I was fully aware of was what going back to those
Mm,
memories was going to do to me.
Yeah.
Especially when you go back to them in such vivid description. If you're writing what you saw, what you heard, what you felt, your body and your mind can't differentiate between what's happening to you right now sitting at a computer and
And
what
what
happened.
happened to you then? Yep.
So I've heard people say that for, they were going to try to knock out their memoir in 30 days and give yourself grace. It might be a long haul, and I pushed my way through it, and I don't think that that was a good idea. That's my advice is give yourself grace, because your body is going to react, your mind is going to react, even when you've done the healing work, even when you've gone into counseling or you've dealt with the past of the trauma. It's still a wound that you're going back to and ripping open. So
Yeah.
first and foremost, give yourself grace, be prepared for that, have a team of people who are supportive. So if you have a therapist, if you have a circle of friends, if you have family that you trust, have them to lean on during the writing process. Um, just people that are safe. They don't have to be family or anything. Whoever it is that you're closest to that you can reach out to, pace yourself, lean on other people, and then also know too that the publishing industry, unfortunately, is designed to tell you no.
Yeah.
So it's very hard not to take it personal when it's your personal story.
Hmm.
And the rejection that you can get from publishers or agents can feel personal.
Yeah.
Oh, this, if you query out your book and it doesn't get the response. So just know that your story is worthy of being told, and that there are many avenues
To get
beyond
it out there. Yep.
publishing that can allow you to do that. So I would recommend, maybe testing the waters with a personal essay, writing for a lit magazine, or writing for a publication that maybe is on a smaller level. If you've done public speaking, that can help sometimes. But if you're not comfortable doing that, just know that once it's out there, it is out there. So that is a legacy that you're leaving behind, no matter where you go in life, that you've written this down. So I encourage it. I think everybody on an individual level needs to have their voice be heard. I just want people to take care of themselves when they do in the process, because like I said, it is reopening a very old wound
Yeah.
and can impact you all over again.
Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned it earlier, your foundation, 1 in 3 Foundation, named after the statistic that 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. How do you actually balance your advocacy with your creative work?
It can be difficult. It can be difficult just because, in addition to having the foundation, I am a mom and I am a wife and I am an author. So that's a lot of hats. I'm a doctor.
Hmm.
That's a lot of those are a lot of spinning plates. But the advocacy truly comes back to my mission of the book, the writing, any essays that I've written about being a survivor. That's all to me part of the mission of the foundation. Is to help people feel less alone and less like they were on an island. Because, as you mentioned, the statistic is 1 in 3
Hmm.
women that we know of are
Yeah, I was going to say that's reported, right?
have experienced physical or sexual violence. So we aren't alone, but we don't talk about it. And I know Me Too came along, and that encouraged the conversation. And then it started to, in some ways, fade away from the public eye or become maligned we've had public figures, try to tear down the
The
authenticity
movement, yeah.
and the movement. And that's very disheartening. So I think that the advocacy comes from just seeing the need. Whenever as you mentioned earlier, and as we were talking about, you can't turn on the news cycle now and not, especially as a survivor, feel impacted by what's happening in our world,
Yeah.
whether it's feeling safe or whether it's seeing the rights of people being stripped away.
Even
And
our own rights as women, yeah.
and I feel like on those days where, and sometimes it does come in, we might have a call from somebody that's in distress, and I might be in the middle of being in the carpool line, trying to pick my kid up, but we're always there to be responsive. So it is a balancing act and it can be difficult, but I think just having a heart for it and knowing why I started it, um, helps me on a daily basis when sometimes it feels like it's too much.
Okay. Now let's switch gears a little bit. You spent years as a journalist reporting on major events and investigations. What made you sort of transition into the memoir and fiction writing field?
Well, I can honestly say that the memoir was not supposed to be the first book that I released. I started writing The Senator. I really wrote the first draft of it. It was not a good draft, but I wrote a draft of it in
You
2000.
started it. It doesn't matter if it was good or not. Yeah, you did it.
I started it in 2017, and I'll be honest, I'm a Tumblr girl, so I loved writing and posting. I was reporting at the time, but I was writing fiction and posting it on Tumblr under an alias, and I had quite the following, and people kept saying, you should write, like you should really write. And so it was kind of tongue in cheek for me because I knew I was a reporter, but I felt like those were such different worlds, writing fiction versus writing, again, someone's story, and going down to someone's house and interviewing them and putting it on paper or on broadcast. So I didn't intend for the memoir to be first, but then COVID hit 2020,
Yeah.
and I had been doing a lot of speaking about the foundation. I had been doing a lot of connecting with women in the community about 1 in 3. And it was just one of those things that wouldn't shake loose. And, every time I would try to put it on the back burner and say, no, that's not what I would want to do, it would just felt like there was more affirmation. This was saying, write it. Nobody was asking me to do it. Nobody was saying, hey, put down your most intimate thoughts and your most vulnerable stories. But it
God
just,
was sending you the signs. The confirmations were everywhere.
it really was. So I sat the Senator on the back burner, and I worked on the return trip, and I was very fortunate that not very long into the process, I met my publisher with Rising Action Publishing, and they picked up the book and worked with me through the rest of the development process for it. So it was not what I originally intended. The book that's about to come out would have been first, but I'm very, very fortunate and feel very blessed that I have been able to put both of those into the publishing world.
Okay. Now, your memoir, The Return Trip. Again, we've been discussing it off and on. It's a deeply personal story. What was the hardest part about putting your truth on the page?
I think it was honestly, I think it was wondering how it was going to impact the other people in my life, because I have such strong convictions about speaking about what I've endured, and
Hmm.
it's Maya's experience. So this is Maya's story, but Maya didn't go through that alone. And so
Right.
in writing about that and writing about my husband and writing about my parents, it was taking that into account. But ultimately the thing that got me over the hurdle was uh just saying, you know what, this book is from my perspective, and other people might remember it or feel differently about it. But I'm going to tell it the way that I know how to tell it. And Mary Carr, who's the author of The Liars Club, and she wrote really an excellent how-to for anybody who's looking to get started. It's called The Art of Memoir, and she basically said that if someone sees your story differently and they don't agree with what you wrote down, then tell them to write their own damn book. And
I was
so,
just gonna say, is she the one that said tell them to write their own version of it? Yeah.
yes. So, that kind of helped me get over that way of thinking too, and just being honest and saying this is my perspective of what happened, and not trying to hurt anybody by any depictions or anything, but this is the truth of how it was for me. So I think that in the name of authenticity, that was the thing that kept me going. Even though it was hard at times, it was still the thing that motivated me to continue writing it.
Okay. Now let's talk about The Senator, your upcoming novel. Now, this tackles politics, environmental justice, and corruption. How did your background in journalism sort of inspire this story?
Oh, this is I'm gonna try to shorten this answer because it's a lot of different factors. One that propelled me to write it was that my grandparents grew up in lived in South Dallas, and they lived in an area that would now we would call it a sacrifice zone
Yeah.
because in the shadow of a plant and that put out pollution, and there was dumping in the area and all sorts of things. And so when I first heard the term sacrifice zone, it really stood out to me because that's where I spent my summers playing, and you don't think anything of it, but people are trying to have their little chunk of the American dream in these areas that are known to have carcinogens and pollutants in the
That could
soil.
literally harm their bodies and kill them.
Right. And there's you know states all over the in the US that have these areas that are close to these toxic environments. So that was one thing that inspired me to write it, and I did dedicate it to my grandparents' memory. The second was, and this is again the condensed version of it, but when I first became an on-air reporter, there was a story about the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and a local company that had multiple violations. And I wanted so desperately to go out to a community that would have been considered a sacrifice zone and talk to the people that live there about the violations list that had come out, because it was in the soil, it was in the air, it was in the creeks nearby. And without throwing anyone under the bus, the management of that TV station discouraged doing that story.
Mm,
So that was in 2004. And that sat on my heart for 13 years that I didn't get to do that story. Um, Partly because of bureaucracy and money dealings. And so there's a line in the senator that says, even the media here knows what's going on.
mm,
And so it really made me want to uncover the truth of people that are living in these areas, that the companies know about it. But also, I grew up. I mean, I'll just say it was a time of white male influence in political thriller genres. But I grew up in the '90s when John Grisham's books
yes.
were everywhere. When
Everywhere. Yeah.
all of his books were becoming films, and so that's what I grew up reading at that time, was those thrillers. And so that just stuck with me. And um the reporter, writing about a reporter, you write sometimes what you know, and all of those things kind of contributed into making this story. And I'm really excited for the response to it.
I love it. Now, in this particular work, you emphasize the hero's journey for Black women. Why is it important for you to depict the Black female protagonist beyond the strong Black woman trope that we often get?
Because I think that it is a a, a tired trope. I hate to say that, but
It's true, yeah.
and it's not to either, and having written a memoir, even I struggled with, am I again adding to the trauma of Black women's stories? I even struggled with writing about that. But it is the truth of a lot of women's stories. But for me, with Alex Broussard, the character in The Senator, the female protagonist, she has a strong background. She's from New Orleans, which was my shout out to a city that I love very desperately. And I just put a lot of tenacity in her.
Hmm.
And I thought about her pursuit of journalistic ethics,
Hmm.
still believing there are journalists that do truly still believe in the ethics of the business, and that journalists exist to expose corruption and disorder and chaos in the country and in society. So I just wanted to make her where she had a lot of conviction about those things and that she's not deterred by that. And so I thought we really needed her as a character to root for, especially right now. But
Yes.
um,
We
also,
do, we do. We need her.
but
We
also,
need her in real life.
yes, we do. I will say too, I also was a big fan of Scandal with the Shonda Rhimes TV series.
Yeah.
And so I loved Olivia Pope. And so she was, Alex is a journalist, not a lawyer or a problem fixer like Olivia, but I really liked Olivia as that character. She was
Yeah,
confident and tough. She had her issues here and there, but she could handle it, like she
yeah.
said. So that's how I saw Alex being as well.
I love that. Okay. Now, let's move on to your next project. This one will explore the neurodiversity and your experience as a mother to a child with autism spectrum disorder. How do you plan to approach this story?
It really, to me, has to be told in a way it is specific to us, to me and my son, but as I've shared about being the mother of a child with autism spectrum disorder and the trials that we've had, and then also being on my own healing journey from my own childhood trauma and trying to navigate that and be in therapy and be a mom, how those things began to overlap because we're taking him to specialists and having speech therapists work with him, occupational therapists work with him, having to teach him calming techniques. And sometimes I'm telling him, take a deep breath, let's breathe together. And then I'm realizing, oh, as I'm doing this with him, for him, this is helping me.
Yeah, I was going to say that you realizing that you need it as well.
Right. So a lot of it being a parent who is a survivor changes how I approach parenting. And because of my experiences with being in therapy and doing my own healing work, I think I am a different parent, because of that, and it doesn't mean a better parent because everybody has their moments and their days, but I just mean that I can see my child and his struggles, and it's almost like we are so in tune with each other sometimes that we don't have to say anything. I just pick up on it, and out of nowhere, he might give me a hug and give me a kiss on the cheek and say, "Love you, mama." And it's just like this unspoken connection that we have of understanding each other and empathizing with each other.
That is so beautiful. Does he know that you're working on this book? How old is he, if you don't mind me asking?
It's okay to ask. He's 11. He doesn't know. He could probably care less most of the time what I do. He
And let
is
me just say this, that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he has autism. That's just an 11-year-old, okay?
very, very, very much so. I think one of the funniest stories with him was when I was doing sports regularly. His teachers asked, what do your parents do? And he told them that I played football, because he would see me on TV at football games. So, I think that was probably the most cool I've ever been to him when he was about 4 and would see me on TV at football games. But outside of that, I think he thinks I just exist to drive him to school and make mac and cheese. So,
Yeah, that's all of them. They think we exist to dote and wait on them. Yeah.
so
Now, you said that you write cinematically. That's like visualizing every scene like a movie. If one of your books was adapted for the screen, what would your dream cast and director
oh,
look like?
oh, oh, oh. Um, I for the return trip, I think I'm too close to that to picture any dream cast. I would say that for the senator, um, I I'm putting this out in the universe, so if she sees that, but Gugu and Bathara,
Ooh,
if she was out, my Alex Broussard brought to life on screen, I think that would be perfect. Outside of that, there's a couple other characters in there. But I would love to have her be the main actress and any director that would be willing to come on board.
well,
I
let's
would,
put that out into the universe and
yes.
hope that it happens. And you remember us little people when it doesn't.
Oh,
Listen, okay. Now you've worked for outlets like Newsweek, Salon, and Insider. How did your journalism career sort of prepare you for the world of publishing?
I think it's hard to say, but I think in some ways it's a thick skin, uh,
Okay.
because it's a thick skin, but then also knowing how to talk with people and to get into rooms and spaces where you usually aren't. That's the job of
Yeah.
a journalist. That's probably the main job of a journalist is getting entry and access to things and spaces. And being a Black female, especially doing when I was doing sports, there most of the meetings and the pre-production sessions that we had, I was the only person in there that looked
That
like.
look like you. Yeah.
So I think it prepared me in the ways that it gives you a thick skin for those moments of rejection. Now, I'm saying that, please don't believe that I didn't boohoo cry when I got a few of the.
Listen, we all do. Yes. Okay.
But also it gave me the journalist part of me gave me that, okay, I'm gonna keep going. And it's
Okay.
kind of that same concept of I'm gonna continue digging. And then I found again the right people, and they found me as well, and it's worked out. So I think it's really that, just having a thick skin. When you're a journalist, I don't think people realize, especially being a local TV journalist or a state regional journalist, that people comment on your hair, your skin, I mean,
We just there was just a story about a young lady, and I want to say she was in Michigan, where a writer wrote in and told her, for lack of better words, and excuse my language, that she looked like a whore. Yeah. A Black woman who sat at the desk on the TV news, and she shared it online because he said he didn't care. He gave his information, his phone number, his email address, and he
wow.
told her that she needed to take that makeup off because she looked like a whore. So we're starting to realize that you guys, as journalists, just working the local news, get a lot of people who are sending you hate mail, who are sending you their opinions about your clothes, your hair, makeup, all of that. So we're getting a taste of that now.
Yeah, and it's not just that aspect of it, but people feel like they have this strange ownership over you, or that they know you directly, because
Hmm.
it is in a way being a local celebrity. You
Yeah.
go miles outside your viewing area, nobody knows who you are. But in that regard, people feel like they have access to you. But even when I did news for a long time as well. And even when you're doing stories that you feel are right and are showing injustices, you're going to have people that it ticks them off, and they're going to push back too. And so it's a very fine line of doing your job well, but you got to look a certain way. And, you're going to have one side coming at you with their opinion and another side. So you're constantly caught in the middle. And I think in that regard, it just, again, it gave me such a tougher skin and a thicker skin to handle the publishing world edits. Sometimes you get edits and they could be rough too. Like, this doesn't make sense. Take this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm so accustomed to those things that, not saying that all my edits come back that way. I have worked with wonderful editors, but I think that when they do come in, that you're not as sensitive about them.
Okay. Now, you as a journalist, as a news person, you've seen firsthand how people's lives get their stories get sort of reduced to buzzwords in media and politics. How do you ensure that your stories remain centered on the people and not just the head?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. I think probably the biggest part of that is just remembering the message of it. Um, it is very easy to have those stories be diminished, or we see with the news cycle, things can be a topic, spark outrage for a few days, and then they move on. Right now, it's not even a full day. It's from morning to afternoon. So in writing my books or my stories, I do have to give myself a level of detachment from them and step back.
Okay.
But so I've written some very personal essays that have been published about situations. And, when they've gone live, I've just made sure I wasn't online to protect my peace.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it, I reminded myself why I wrote it.
Yeah.
And again, it's always, always with the goal of helping someone else feel seen, heard, understood, not to info dump about my life, but just to help and to be a voice.
Okay. Now, we talked about publishing a little bit earlier, but this is a area that has historically been difficult for Black women writers, just getting their books published, especially in genres like political dramas or thrillers, even nonfiction. What has your experience been, and how can we change the industry for future Black authors?
I think we need to honestly have more of the people who are at the I wanna say the ground level of where these stories come in.
Mhm.
I went the route with my publisher, is an independent publishing house, and they're actually in Canada. They're woman-owned, women-run business, and I think that that influenced part of them picking up my story as opposed to initially a US. It's distributed obviously in the US, but I think they were more open to it than some of the US agencies. Uh, and that was interesting to me, but I think what we really need is the people at the ground level of the publishing houses. When those queries come in, having somebody take a look at them a little more closely than them just going to the slush pile.
Yeah.
And but I also think too that we need more Black representatives in the publishing world, and I don't just mean as agents, although that would be wonderful. I also mean as editors, as distributors, working at, we can talk about the Big Four or any of those publishing houses, but there are independent publishing agencies that print, and I'm not just talking about the boutique publishers, but also the indie publishers, and I think that's a real opportunity for us to grow because, it's the big four, but who's to say one day it won't be the big 10? Uh,
Yeah. I'm
because
Go
okay, go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say because some of those smaller publishers will grow. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's where uh, we need those voices in the room to be able to say why these stories are important and why these books need to be published or why these stories need to be told, because sometimes it is missed on the reader if that's not their experience, and then they might toss it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's where, and I actually had that happen with an agent that said, this just I didn't relate to this.
And I was gonna say it probably needs to be more people like us on the ground level who understand the stories that are being written too, because those, like you said, those queries are being pushed to the slush file because somebody clearly doesn't understand that there's actually a market for this out here.
I was told at one point in time that only celebrity memoirs sold. And
Wow.
that only celebrity memoirs get published, and we are seeing it feels like there are, every week I'm seeing a celebrity that
And
has a new,
that's true. It's a celebrity or a politician, one or the other. Yeah.
and there is a big boom in that right now, but I think that it is I think that it is foolish to think that the stories of average everyday people don't deserve to be heard in the same voice. No, I'm not, Prince Harry, no disrespect, but I think they want the guarantee that the book is going to
And I
sell.
was gonna say, if I feel like what happens is the reason why there's a big boom is because that's what they're pushing. They're pushing those. If they pushed other stories, if they marketed other stories along with those, they would get interest in everything that they marketed or pushed.
Exactly. And I think it's just a matter of being a little more open to it. Or if they don't know how to market it, hire the people that do. Hire the people who know how to reach the
Yeah.
people in the areas that do, because that's another comment I heard was not sure how we would market this book. Well,
What
if I can tell you in my proposal that 1 in 3 women have experienced this story in some form, then there is a market for it.
I was going to say, that you telling me that lets me know that there is an easy market for it. As someone who works in publishing and does marketing, though that to me, you're telling what you said about, first of all, your foundation, marketing, not just the book, but the foundation, marketing everything around your experience and what you were doing. It's quite simple if they just took the time to get to know you and get to know the audience.
I think it's also understanding the audience, because I think right now we have, book talk is very vocal, and so there's a pitch for these books that appeal to that or upmarket in that respect, but people still have a thirst for reading true experiences, being moved by other people's experiences, and you don't get a Maya Angelou book by ignoring it in a slush pile. Somebody had to have taken that story and given
Yeah.
it a chance in the very, very beginning of her career for that to take off. So, and then it becomes a matter of, well, who was the person who discovered so and so? Well, it's not necessarily a matter of discovering someone, it's just giving them a chance to have their story be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when people look back at your work in advocacy, what do you hope your legacy as a writer and leader will be?
I really hope that people see my conviction and that I truly the things that I wrote about mattered to me. Not just in a way of, well, this is my story and I'm self-centered and focused on myself. I mean that I understand and connect with, maybe what happened to me wasn't the exact same thing that happened to someone else, but I can understand what you've been through, and I can understand with how that's changed you as a person on some level enough for there to be humanity there. And so I think my what I want my legacy to be is that of humanity and empathy, of trying to tell stories as a journalist, trying to tell stories as an author, even with a political thriller, that come back to shining a light on people in rough situations, hard situations, and how we can help them get through that, whether it's through the foundation, whether it's through writing, whether it's through sharing my own personal stories and experiences. I still want that to be the biggest takeaway is just truth and storytelling and trying to help people through storytelling.
Okay. Now, what advice would you give to an aspiring Black women writers who want to break into the industry but feel a little intimidated?
I would say learn and lean on community. I think that that's one thing that I do see and am so encouraged by in the writing community is the level of support for other authors. I Even though I had a journalistic background, don't let that fool you. I had no idea where to get started. I really did. I didn't even know what a query was because in my career, it was just I would reach out to outlets and say, "Hey, this is a thing I want to write about. Are you interested in it?" As a pitch. I wasn't accustomed to that. So having to write out and flesh out a full pitch or a query. So I had to start from ground zero, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without community.
Yeah.
So I learned about that from hashtag writing community on different social media platforms and taking writing workshops. And in taking writing workshops, meeting other people that became more of that community, people who were writing about the same things or in the same areas of mental health or had the kind of same personalities, and we just sort of latched on to each other and buoyed each other. But then also finding mentors. I think that was the other big thing was um, it can be hard when you're writing personal things to want to share that with anybody. And I would advise maybe getting a little bit further along before you do, so you don't get discouraged by anyone. But having mentors and again, taking those writing classes, I don't care how long you have been writing, they have different levels for them. But I think that it's more about finding that community and having those people that support you, that's really what got me through and helped me to learn because again, I started from not knowing where a query was to this will be my second book coming out. So I'm pretty I think if I allow myself, I'm not very much one to do that, but I think if I allow myself to look back at that and say, wow, from 2020 to 2025, that's a pretty quick jump. But
That's
it
a very good jump. So, congratulations to you. And we're very proud of you, Mai.
But again, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have had people that I could ask questions from. And so I again, if you're shy, I say, you know what, writing is a career for introverts. So you could just email people all day long, never have to look at them in the face if you don't want to.
Okay.
But at least reach out to people and ask them your questions and they'll help you along your path.
Love it. Maya, I'm going to drop off the screen for a moment and it's just going to be you. I want you to tell people where to find you, your social media, your website, all of that information. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're interested in my memoir, The Return Trip, it is available in ebook and audio form at any retailer. The hardcover edition of it is being re-released on March the 4th and is distributed by Simon & Schuster from Rising Action Publishing. And you'll be able to purchase that through Barnes & Noble, independent booksellers, Amazon, Target, any of those retailers. And then also, if you are interested in the political thriller, The Senator, again, it is available through any major retailer, any independent bookstore, releasing on April the 15th, 2025. And also we'll have an audiobook and an ebook edition available. As far as getting in contact with me, if you have any questions for me about writing or being part of your journey, or you're just looking for some advocacy and support, my website is goodasgolden.com. I'm on Instagram at goodasgolden, and my Facebook is MGB Writes. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at maya.golden.bluesky.
And Maya, we will include all of that information in the article that we write about you as well. I just want to say thank you so very much for allowing us to feature you on our Creative Black Women Spotlight. This has been a joy, and I cannot wait for the senator to come out.
Well, thank you. If you give me, I'll connect with you later. Is this still going to be on, or is this?
Yeah. You stick around afterwards, and we'll talk.
Okay.
All right, you guys, Maya's story is one that can inspire us all. Maya Golden Bethany is a storyteller. She is someone who is out here making she's telling the truth and advocating, who is using her who is making her platform available for those who are wanting to amplify voices, challenge systems, and create change, whether through journalism, fiction, or advocacy. Her work reminds us that our stories matter and deserve to be told with power and authenticity. Her memoir, The Return Trip, and her political thriller, The Senator, are both are available for pre-order, and you can support her nonprofit, the 1 in 3 Foundation, in its mission to serve survivors. Maya, once again, thank you for your words, your wisdom, and your unwavering commitment to truth and to justice. And until next time, you guys, we'll be back with another creative Black woman. See you later.